What's up, people? Hopefully, I'm not blocking the mic. So, this thing is cool. I don't know how to get my hand out of it. I guess I should have used my uh, little tripod. So, anyway, on my way to the gym, like normal, I got a PT test tomorrow, so I'm just gonna go walk it out on the treadmill for about an hour or so, get my thoughts together, and probably listen to my audio book for my political science class. Thank God for audiobooks, because, reading can get a little boring, but I can walk on the treadmill and or run while I'm listening to my book and therefore studying. So, what I'm thinking about is, what's on my mind? What I'm thinking about is how people seem to have cut themselves off from knowledge, in a sense that people don't seem open to seeing things from other people's point of view. And I think what happens is we label ourselves so much, like evangelical Christian, conservative Christian. We put ourselves with these labels on it, and then we see people who represent these things, and to me, if I were to be nice about it, they're like unsatisfactory. Like, if you are a conservative Christian, I'm sorry, but like the people who are in the news media who say they're conservative Christians don't seem to be nice and friendly people. I mean, look at the Southern Baptist Convention. Like, initially, they had to have a meeting to denounce the alt-right. But what would Jesus do in that example? What color was Jesus? Does it matter? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it matters because white Jesus has been weaponized. Other than that, maybe if that wasn't the case, maybe it wouldn't matter. I don't know. So we just see what's going on and we decide for ourselves what we're going to believe. And I just think that, before you decide to get down or lay down with a label, that you should know what they represent. Look at the senator, I think his name is Jeff Flake. So he just said today, he took a stand and said, what the president is doing is not conservative, and that other people should stand out when it comes to these things going on. So we have to decide like what we want to represent and how we look in doing so. If we're supposed to represent Christ, there comes a time where you do have to put your career on the line. You do have to decide what's right and wrong, and you do have to decide, like, what do you believe that God is telling you to do in that time. And I feel that the result from something like that, the thing that God would have you to do, will result in ultimately love being displayed across all kind of generations and all kind of ethnicities. Ultimately, even when you stand up for what's right, they might try to, the powers that be may try to hijack what you're doing, like Colin Kaepernick, but ultimately it will bring more people together, like it really has. It has forced people to look at what happens in our great country. It's forced people to pay attention to the racial biases that we have in this country, and the way that we treat people, and the way that the rule of law is not applied to all people. And so what we're finding is that people are having to choose between their character and their affiliation. So is your character worth carrying a label that is being misrepresented? Like, if I could talk to Senator Jeff Flake right now, I would ask him, okay, so if Mr. President Trump is doing is not conservative, then what is conservative? Because right now when you look at the news, it's crazy. When you look at what conservative people are voting for, it's crazy. When you look at policies that conservative people are voting for, it's crazy. So what particularly is conservative? That's what I would like to know. That's what I would like to discuss. So another thing that, I've seen people posting about today, people talk about being pro-life. So what's amazing to me about the identity of pro-life is people say they're pro-life, but then want to cut all the social programs that the kids that are living actually use. They want to cut the social programs that are used in our inner city neighborhoods. So how can you say that you're pro-life, but you don't want to take care of the children that are actually living? What sense does that make? So you say that, you say that I'm pro-life, but don't want to renew social programs. You want to defund them that are actually working in underprivileged neighborhoods. There's so much history when it comes to the racial dynamics of America. From redlining to being rebranded as gentrification, to slavery going away and the rebranding as the prison industrial complex, to credits not being extended to people of color. That's one of the reasons why you go into inner city neighborhoods and you notice that people of color don't usually own anything there. They were not given the same opportunity to get that credit. So they give it to foreigners instead. You just go in the neighborhoods and you look. Or they give it to a person who is not of color. So you just look at all these things and, people are quick to label themselves and to join themselves in fraternities and organizations and Masons and all these kinds of things. But are those people truly representing what you want to represent? Are you living the life that God would have you to live? Because, so that leads me to another thing. That's what I really wanted to talk about in the beginning, but sometimes, it takes me a little while to get my thoughts out. So this is what I wanted to talk about. The fact that we are not Christian. How can I say that? Well, when you look at Christianity as a whole, first of all, Jesus wasn't a Christian. You look at Christianity as a whole, it was heavily influenced by Catholicism. And being influenced with Catholicism, it brought in paganism and all these other holidays that we like to celebrate that were not warranted, so to speak. All these holidays that were not considered holy, but actually were pagan knockoffs. So a lot of things that we celebrate now, Christmas and Easter and those kinds of things, were not holidays that were celebrated by the early church. But yet somehow we have said that they are acceptable and branded them as Christian somehow. But I don't understand how we could even do that when they were not celebrated by the early Christians. It's like a case of mistaken identity or lost identity that we would think that it's okay to celebrate these things when they clearly, it's amazing. So that ties into, being labeled or associating yourself with labels and organizations without looking at the history of them. How does a people do that? Say, I'm part of this organization, this is what I want to represent, but you haven't looked at the fullness of what those people actually represent, the history of them. And I'm not saying all history is going to be good, right? I'm not saying that, there's no skeletons in anyone's closet, but generally speaking, like what they believe, what the organization represents and the direction now is what really matters. So the Christianity that many people practice today was not the Christianity of the early church. Look at Frederick Douglass. He talked about the Christianity of this land and how disgusting it was. Just Google his speech or his paper written on Christianity of America. You know, one of my friends says that American Christianity is the mark of the beast. We could debate that, we can agree or disagree with that, but one thing that we do know is that a lot of churches today practice witchcraft, you know, and maybe I shouldn't say a lot, I should say some churches today practice witchcraft, and ultimately one of the reasons why the church is not growing is not just because the scripture that says there'll be a great falling away, but you don't have to fall away from the church to fall away, if you know what I'm saying. You fall away by not keeping the commandments. Why don't we go to, why doesn't, I've been in churches where they decide to mock those that observe the Sabbath, but they don't tell you to observe the Sabbath. Why not though? Why not? Why are they not telling you to observe the Sabbath? It's amazing to me. So whereas you want to mock those who observe the Sabbath, you want to say that's Old Testament, but God himself rested and observed the Sabbath. Yahshua HaMashiach observed the Sabbath. So why do we say that we're not supposed to observe the Sabbath, or that it's Old Testament, when Yahshua never changed it? He never changed the Sabbath. We could argue about what day it is and this and that, but go and research for yourself. That is the element that's truly missing from everything. The fact that, you know, people should go and do the research for themselves to figure out. It's kind of like how, I say this all the time, how can you say you love God but don't know what pleases him? How can people say, how can somebody say they love you but they don't know what you like? It just doesn't work that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break and take it off of 360, and I'll be back. See ya.